Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. Today I am at Blue Lake Park with 3 of my 4 kids. We are enjoying the coolness of the lake and playing outside. Now, we live in Portland, Oregon, where it is not really the kind of community where you swim a lot because it's cold and rainy so much of the year. So I grew up in Arizona and Texas, and I was on swim teams starting at age 7 and had my Red Cross advanced swimmers, and so much of my social life and out of school life revolved around the pool, especially in Texas. Like, we were just at the pool. We lived at the pool. My mom would give me $2 so that I could buy snacks. She would give me the pool pass and say, don't come back till dinner. And I would go and hang out with my friends all day long. But my kids don't really have that option, and because of COVID, the indoor pools were shut down for a long period of time. Now, they've all had swim lessons, but they're not all really strong swimmers. So I try and look for opportunities where they can get some swimming that is really safe and allows them to still socially distance and also is like not in a high current area. So we'd gone to the river the other day. I made a video about it, and I had gotten the request from 2 of my kids that we go somewhere that had no current and that was an area they could stand up in and still practice swimming. So Blue Lake, which is only about 12 minutes from my house, seemed like the perfect opportunity. So I had gotten a request several Hausfrau Fridays ago to talk a little bit more about parenting, and I realized that this is a permaculture YouTube channel, and my Hausfrau Friday videos are kind of that overlap where I try and talk about domestic skills. But the reality is, when we're talking about domestic skills and we're talking about sustainable living and trying to live out those permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share, that parenting children, and not just parenting, but how we communicate and interact with children, is something that we can and should examine, because it is a reality of how we're living and how we're interacting with folks of different ages. So I thought there's some interactions happening here out at the lake that are a great example, and I thought it would illustrate, I would use them as an illustration here a little bit. My kids are 19, almost 20, 17, 14, and 11. I have 2 girls and 2 boys. And I have a lot of experience, almost 20 years experience parenting. So that's almost as much time as I've been a homemaker. And my parenting has really evolved. And honestly, my permaculture ethics and the way I approach permaculture have really shaped the way that I parent. I was raised in a very strict household with, my parents doing the best that they could with the skills that they had. And when we have the opportunity to have more skills and grow our knowledge base and expand what we understand about the way humans communicate and the way that child development works, we can create better parenting, right? More skillful parenting. Much like in permaculture, when we understand the conditions of our site, we can design specific designs for that site. When we understand the nature of how children operate, how they work, how their minds work, we can better craft ways of communicating with them. So for me as a parent, we don't do punishment, we don't do discipline in the traditional sense, and we don't do anything that's coercive. I want to treat my kids like they're human beings. I'm having a weird hair day because I had my hat on, sorry. I don't want to coerce my kids in any way. I want to respect their autonomy, respect who they are as people, and still keep them safe. I'm noticing here while my kids are playing in the water that there's like a day camp going on. And I'm seeing 2 really good illustrations of how we can communicate with kids. And one of those feels like a way that I would choose to communicate with my kids. So I thought, let's just do a little bonus video and I'll talk about it for a second. It's a really good illustration of how you have compassionate, respectful communication with kids that respects their autonomy and keeps them safe versus maybe a more traditional approach. There's a day camp here and there's 2 camp counselors. And I'm noticing they have really distinct styles of communicating with the kids. So there's quite a bit of splashing going. The counselors are wading in the water. They don't particularly want to be splashed. I noticed one of them is, checking his phone, hanging out on his phone, and the kids are splashing. And the first counselor says, if you do that again, you're out of the water for 2 minutes. It's a really common way that we parent in Western culture, this very strong authoritarian dynamic, which is basically based on threats. Do what I want or you will have a punishment. Euphemistically, it's often referred to as a consequence in modern parenting. That's a very normal way that we've been conditioned to relate to children. It's not something that would be in my toolbox personally. And then I noticed the other camp counselor, when he gets splashed, he says, hey, let's make sure that we all are interacting in a way that has consent. I don't consent to being splashed. So if you want to splash, take your splashes over there. And I thought, dude, that's a really great way of talking to the kids. That's exactly how I would talk to my kids. Like, I don't want to be splashed right now. If you want to splash, do it somewhere else. Also, let's remember consent in the way we interact with each other. What a wonderful way to talk to children. And it just really illustrates for me that shift in the way we think about communicating with kids. Kids are human beings. Kids have a different developmental stage that they are currently in from us as adults. But that doesn't mean that we communicate with them in a coercive way or in a way that is based around punishment. When we look at a permaculture mindset of how we want to focus on abundance, we want to have an abundance mindset instead of an extractive mindset, I think that really translates to the way we parent kids and the way that I have raised my children and interact with them, where I think about what is the end result that I want? How can everything be a learning opportunity? How can the problem be the solution? So instead of having a threat-based parenting, punishment-based parenting, parenting that is about me asserting my control over my kids and creating a situation where I can set up the goalposts myself and I can manipulate the situation to get the outcome that I want. I actually have a relationship with my kids. I remind them how I want to be treated. I model the behavior that I want. I set up expectations that I want. And if things don't go my way, we have a conversation and a dialogue about it. And I create healthy boundaries, and I encourage my kids to do the same. It's very much similar in our garden. If we have a traditional kind of industrial model of viewing the way that we garden, it's very extractive. It's about us as the gardener exerting control over our garden, about getting what we want out of our garden, getting the harvest that we want, getting the aesthetic that we want, often having a high level of input on our part and a high level of control. In fact, that's one of the things that I've noticed when people comment like, your garden is a little messy. As a person who naturally really wants to have a high level of control, for me, I find that if my anxiety is pushing me one way, I need to go the other way. So if my anxiety is saying, you need to have more control over this garden, you cannot loosen your grip, you've got to be the force that is dominating the garden, I need to do the opposite. Very much so with my parenting. If I feel like what I want to do is X, then basically I do the opposite. If I want to do the way I was conditioned as a child, pretty sure the most effective and respectful way to communicate with my kids is to do the opposite. It's been a very successful strategy for me thus far. It's worked out really, really well. It's not perfect. It's difficult to parent your kids when you don't have punishment. But just like I don't want to exert control over the garden, I don't want to exert control over my kids. I don't want to have a high level of domination. I don't want to have authoritarian parenting. I don't want to have authoritarian gardening. So for me, the way that I parent and the way that I practice gardening, there's a lot of overlap. In permaculture, we're looking for those connections in all things. And the older I get, the more I see that the patterns that I create in my life, the patterns of communication, the patterns of interaction with other people, with the garden, with my community, with the way that I think about and relate to my body, those things are all really connected. And I see similar successful strategies across the board, right? So I hope you enjoyed this bonus little Hausfrau Friday video. I hope that it was helpful for you all, and I will be back very soon. If you have more questions about parenting, I'm happy to do longer videos. I feel like if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I would say I'm winging it and I don't know what I'm doing, but I have a lot of experience now. My kids are all older. I know what has really not worked for me and what has been really successful dealing with neurodiverse kids, dealing with kids who have really strong personalities, and parenting the way that I would want to have been parented. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'll be back really soon from my garden.